You open your eyes, not because the sun has risen, but because something deeper has shifted. The silence has changed. The air isn't cold, not yet, but it feels expectant. The fire in the hearth is a memory now, glowing coals nestled in ash, gently radiating warmth like the breath of something sleeping. Outside the shutters, nothing stirs. The world has gone still. This is the hour between sleeps, when the body rests in two halves, and the mind drifts between them like a ferry boat, slow and strange. You sit up in bed. The linen sheet is wrinkled, your wool blanket still tucked around your legs. The pillow is barely warm, and your mouth is dry, not thirsty, just ready to begin the in-between. Before we step deeper into this strange and lovely hour, take a breath with me. If your eyes are still open, you might like this kind of slow journey through forgotten things. So please, gently like this video, leave a sleepy comment with your location and time, and subscribe if you haven't already. We walk through history slowly here, and you're always welcome. Now, let's drift a little further into the dark. You're in a farmhouse, somewhere between the 1300s and 1500s, depending on what the roof smells like. The bed is wide, stuffed with straw, and wrapped in linen that's been boiled in ash soap until soft. The walls are timber, chinked with daub. There's a dog asleep near the door, and a small ceramic pot where someone has left a bit of warm beer for the cold hours. And most importantly, there's no clock. You know it's between first and second sleep because your body knows, just as it has for thousands of years, long before alarm clocks, before electricity, before the idea that sleep had to be continuous and disciplined and confined to a tidy 8 hours. No, sleep was once a story told in 2 acts, and this, right now, is the quiet intermission. Between the 9th and 18th centuries across much of Europe, people commonly slept in 2 segments, known today as first sleep and second sleep. The phrase appears in medical journals, prayer books, legal texts, and folk tales. It wasn't strange, it was expected, natural. You'd go to bed shortly after sunset, sleep for 4 or 5 hours, then wake up around midnight, not because you had insomnia, but because this was the pattern of rest your body liked best, in a world ruled by firelight and night air. And after an hour or 2 of quiet, you'd drift back into second sleep until dawn. This in-between hour was sacred in a small way. Not sacred as in religious, though monks certainly filled it with prayers, but sacred as in intimate, private. It was time for reflection, for whispering beside a partner, for quietly getting out of bed to warm your feet at the fire. Sometimes people read scripture or poetry. Sometimes they tended to livestock. Sometimes they sat at the edge of the bed and thought about the weather. There were no rules, just a kind of soft waiting. You wrap a wool shawl around your shoulders and step out of bed. The rushes on the floor are cool underfoot, but clean, changed 3 days ago, with a few sprigs of lavender and mint crushed under the new layer. You breathe in. The scent is faint now, but it's there, a kind of earthy peace. You light a candle stub and watch the shadows leap upward. The room flickers to life, not awake, just aware. On the table sits a loaf of rye bread and a small wedge of cheese. Both were meant for breakfast, but midnight is forgiving, and hunger doesn't always wait for dawn. You cut a small piece, chew slowly, and sit by the embers. The dog snuffles once, adjusts its paw, and continues dreaming. This is not insomnia. This is not restlessness. This is the shape of a different kind of night. In the 1990s, historian Roger Eckerch uncovered hundreds of references to segmented sleep in documents ranging from medieval court records to household diaries. One account from 17th century England describes a man rising after his first sleep to tend the fire, say a few quiet prayers, and walk the garden path for a time before returning to bed. Another describes servants using the gap to stoke the kitchen hearth and prepare dough for morning bread. Yet another, from Italy, notes a nun who used the in-between hours for contemplation, journal writing, and, somewhat famously, light embroidery by candlelight. There was no panic about being awake in the night. Sleep was understood to come in phases, and the body, when trusted, would carry you through all of them in time. You finish your bite of bread and stare into the fire. The coals pulse softly, like a heartbeat. For a moment, you think you hear something outside, wind in the trees maybe, or just the old beams of the house settling. The candle flame wavers. You breathe in long and slow, and feel your body soften around the edges. There's no need to go back to bed yet. You walk to the window and open the shutter just a crack. The sky is deep ink blue, not black, never black. The stars are blurred by winter fog, and the field beyond the house is coated in frost. You see the roof of the neighbor's cottage, the glow of a lantern in their upper window. Someone else is awake too. Maybe they're praying, maybe they're writing, maybe they're simply watching the stars and remembering a dream they've almost forgotten. The candle behind you flutters again, and you close the shutter. This is not the part of the night that people feared. That comes later, the witching hour, when church bells pause and animals act strangely. But we're not there yet. For now, this hour is only yours. A pause between the two halves of being human, sleeping, waking, sleeping again. And somewhere, gently, your second sleep begins calling. You smile. You will answer soon, but not just yet. You sit there for a while, not fully awake, not fully asleep, a kind of floating in between. The candle sputters beside you, its flame dancing just enough to keep the shadows from becoming stories. You're warm now, the blanket draped across your shoulders, your feet tucked into wool socks someone knitted by hand long before you arrived in this moment. The house is silent, but not empty. There's something about this hour, between first and second sleep, that feels like it was made for whispers and sighs and the soft ticking of a mind beginning to wander. This hour wasn't wasted in the past. It was used. In old village homes, it was when the coals were stirred and the ashes gently fluffed to hold heat through the second sleep. In noble estates, it was when letters were written, or books were opened, or someone walked the hallway with a lantern just to stretch their legs and listen to the old wood creak. Sometimes, and often, it was when people made love, quietly, sleepily, in the hush of night when no one was watching and no one expected anything but time to pass. Not because it was romantic, but because it was ordinary, and when sleep broke, the body followed its own rhythm. In 1500s France, medical texts even recommended this midnight interlude as the best time for affection. The body was rested, the mind still soft with dreaming, and the heart not yet filled with the pressures of the coming day. You might be surprised to know even monks wrote about it. Theologians and philosophers from the medieval period to the Enlightenment acknowledged this segmented rest. Some even described their dreams during first sleep as more vivid, more inspired, because they happened right after daily life had ended. That first sleep, they said, cleared the worldly dust from the mind. The second sleep? That was for digestion, healing, and letting the soul quietly return to the body. You sip the last of the warm beer from the clay mug. It's bitter, a little flat, but comforting. The kind of drink that reminds you you're not supposed to be alert. You're not supposed to be productive. You're simply meant to be, to pass through this hour like water flowing between stones. You hear it again, the softest movement, not from outside, but above. You remember the loft, the old woman who lives in the upper room. She's awake too. You can just barely make out the sound of footsteps on the beams above your head, a chair being dragged, the hush of fabric being folded. She's lived here longer than anyone. She probably remembers this sleep rhythm better than most. She probably never unlearned it like the rest of us did, when electricity made the dark optional and modern clocks turned sleep into a deadline. Historians believe this change from 2 sleeps to 1 didn't happen suddenly. It began in cities, in places where gas lamps lit the streets late into the night, and shopkeepers realized they could keep the store open just a little longer, where homes had lamps in every room and nighttime became something to spend instead of sit inside. By the mid-1800s, the industrial world had flattened time, made it measurable, shifted us toward a kind of wakefulness that lasted too long and sleep that came only in one impatient gulp. We stopped listening to the lull between rests. But in your house tonight, time still moves the old way. There are no glowing screens, no midnight email checks, no hum of the refrigerator. Just the fire, the candle, and the soft scratching against the shutters. And your own body, remembering what it was taught by thousands of years of nightfall. You rise again, slowly, and wander toward the small writing table by the wall. It's worn smooth from generations of elbows and ink-stained sleeves. On the table, a parchment book lies half open, a scrap of charcoal resting beside it. You pick it up. It doesn't matter what you write. It could be a prayer, a note to yourself, a strange sentence you dreamed and don't understand. Many people in the past kept dream journals by the bedside. They believed the time between sleeps was a bridge between worlds, and anything recalled during this hour was a message worth recording. So you write. The stream curved backwards. I stepped in anyway. No idea what it means, but you leave it there. Sometimes the second sleep knows more than the first. Elsewhere, in other centuries, others are awake with you. In 12th century Baghdad, a physician in wool robes records patient notes under an oil lamp, squinting as the flame gutters. In early Edo, Japan, a temple caretaker walks the silent garden paths, shaking bells to ward off fox spirits and midnight thieves. In northern Finland, a Sami herder rises to check the sled dogs, pressing warm hands to noses to make sure they still breathe in the frost. They are not frightened of the dark, only respectful of it. Like you. You glance again at the dog, still asleep, still dreaming of hairs and kitchen scraps and places only dogs remember. You envy it a little. But you're not done with this hour yet. You sit once more by the hearth, legs crossed, eyes soft, breath slow. If this hour is a gift, It's the kind that asks for nothing but attention, and you give it. In the quiet, your mind starts to do what minds do. It wanders. You remember someone's face, a scent, a sound from summer. You wonder about the sky, about how many others are awake in this exact moment. You feel your eyes begin to flutter once again. And this time, when your head dips forward and your hand loosens around the candle stub, you don't resist. You simply stand, slip back beneath the covers, and sigh into the folds of a second sleep. Some say it's the deeper sleep. Not longer, not heavier, but richer, where the dreams come gentler, the breathing more even, and the mind no longer tangled with all that came before. The fire is embers now. The old woman above has stopped moving. The dog twitches once, settles, and so do you. As the night resets, quietly, without asking anything more from you than to rest again. Midnight in the village. You open the door. Just a crack, enough to let the cool night air drift in and remind you that, while your room is still and warm, the world beyond it is vast and still awake in its own way. You step outside. Your feet crunch softly on frost-laced straw. The stars hang low, like they've taken pity on how dark the earth can get without them. The moon isn't full, but it's bright enough to cast silver over the rooftops, enough to let you see the steam of your breath as you walk slowly down the path. The village is quiet, but not asleep. This hour, the in-between hour, is when the village breathes its slowest breath. You hear it, in the rustle of thatch, in the groan of old beams, in the shifting of a barn door left slightly ajar. And if you listen closely, you might even hear the creak of another door, not yours, gently opening from across the square. You're not alone in your wakefulness. You never were. Across many medieval and early modern communities, this twilight stretch between the first sleep and second sleep was a shared phenomenon, not just a personal one. Families, couples, and entire households stirred, quietly, often by candlelight, doing tasks that felt too small for daylight, but too necessary to ignore until morning. A blacksmith in northern England might have risen to stoke the forge, not to work, but to check on the coals he'd banked before bed. If they went cold, tomorrow would begin slowly. A weaver's apprentice in Bohemia might sneak a few careful rows on a half-finished tapestry before the mistress of the house saw them wasting thread. A baker already half preparing for dawn. And someone, always someone, sweeping rushes, whispering prayer, or just staring out at the stars. There's a glow up ahead. Not fire, not lamp. It's the bread house, the communal oven. You walk toward it, passing rows of low cottages. Some have smoke trailing faintly from their chimneys, a sign that someone inside is stirring, maybe heating a little broth or steeping crushed thyme in hot water to soothe a winter cough. When you arrive, the smell is unmistakable. Warmth, yeast, cracked barley crust, and maybe a little ash. A young boy, no older than 10, stands by the oven's mouth, peering in with a long paddle in his hands. Behind him, a woman, his mother perhaps, sets down a basket and dusts her hands on her apron. Neither of them says a word. They've done this before. You sit nearby on a low stone wall and watch. It's not your bread, but this is a communal space. It's understood. This hour welcomes those who need it. In medieval villages, bread ovens were central, not just as a practical tool, but as a quiet meeting point during these in-between hours. Families without hearths large enough for baking would knead their loaves by twilight and deliver them to the oven in the middle of the night during this sleepy hour when the flames had died down to perfect baking heat. A sort of sleepy social rhythm formed around it. People came, placed their loaves, and returned before second sleep. It was work, yes, but it wasn't labor. It was simply life, scheduled around the clock of the body. The boy turns, sees you, and smiles slightly. He doesn't speak, you don't either. It's enough to know that someone else is awake, part of the same rhythm, part of the same village heartbeat. You glance upward. The stars have shifted, or perhaps you just have. Further down the path, you pass a pen full of sleeping goats. One is chewing in its sleep. Another, eyes half-lidded, watches you pass without concern. There's a tiny chapel at the edge of the village. Not large, just one room, timber-framed, with a thatched roof and a weathered cross carved into the door. You hear nothing inside, but a thin line of candlelight leaks from under the frame. Monks or villagers sometimes left offerings at this hour. Bread, coins, feathers, bits of ribbon. Superstition, yes, but also something else. A way of remembering that the darkness wasn't empty, that it listened, that the silence had weight. You pause by the chapel and leave a small pine sprig near the door. You don't know why, but it feels like the kind of gesture that fits inside this hour. A soft exhale of gratitude or memory with no expectation of answer. And then you move on. At the far edge of the village, where the path turns to field, you come across an older man, seated on an upturned barrel, holding a clay pipe that isn't lit. He nods to you. You nod back. This is his hour too. Some people couldn't return to second sleep until they'd walked. Others needed to whisper their dreams to the wind. Some simply sat and let the chill in the air clear out the ghosts of the first sleep. "Dreamt I was in the river," he says softly. You raise an eyebrow. "Didn't want to be," he adds, "but it wasn't cold." You don't reply. There's nothing to say. Dreams belong to the night. Speaking them too clearly might make them vanish. Instead, you both sit in the quiet for a while. Before long, he rises. "Time for bed," he mutters, and disappears down a side path. And you're alone again. Only not truly. Because this hour isn't lonely. It's just gentle. It holds people apart, but close enough that their footsteps still echo down the frost-covered paths, their breaths still visible in the air, their candlelight flickering in other windows. The village doesn't sleep all at once. It rocks itself gently, back into stillness. And you, finally, begin to walk home. You close the door behind you. There's a small clunk as the iron latch settles back into place. The warmth hits you again, wrapping around your face like wool pulled over cold cheeks. The faint smell of ash and bread still clings to your clothes. You move quietly now, as if not to wake the fire itself. The candle has gone out, but the embers still glow, a soft orange heart beating under charred bark and crumbled coal. You stoop, stirring the ashes gently with the iron poker. Not too much, not enough to reignite, just enough to remind the hearth it still needed. The room accepts you back without question. The shadows are unchanged, and the blanket folded on the chair still waits patiently, the way it always does. You sit for a moment before returning to bed, and something in you begins to slow. The second sleep was not just a return to rest. It was a transition, a re-entry into the deeper part of the night. Historians describe it as thicker, heavier than the first. Less vivid in dreams, perhaps, but more essential in its repair of the body. And unlike the frantic sleep of modern hours, 4 hours squeezed between alarms and screens, second sleep held you. It cradled you like the last breath of the dark before dawn cracked it open. You stretch. Your limbs feel softer now, your muscles no longer tight from the rush of the day. Even your breath sounds different, lower, deeper, like the sound a slow stream makes passing under frozen reeds. This is when medieval villagers returned to their bedding, sometimes beside others, sometimes alone. In crowded cottages, one's bed was also one's desk, one's chair, one's retreat. It was both public and private, a place of layered meaning. In wealthier homes, the return to sleep was slower. Cloaks were refolded, servants dismissed, curtains drawn around the bed frame, sometimes not to block light, there was none, but to preserve warmth. In monasteries, this hour was often marked by a final bell, the sound echoing down stone corridors to remind those still awake that the world had turned again, and so must they. You rise and make your way to the bed. The straw mattress sighs under you. The wool smells faintly of thyme and earth. You lie down on your side, and the room quiets in response. This is the moment in the past where people often began their second dreams, and they were rarely like the first. In your first sleep, dreams were often vivid, tangled in daily concerns, memories, and physical fatigue. But in the second? In the second, dreams were looser, stranger, less concerned with logic. It's said that in this phase of night, people dreamed of rivers that whispered secrets, dogs that spoke in riddles, windows that led not to fields, but to oceans. There's even mention of this in folklore. The deep hour dreams were the ones that told you things. Not about the world, perhaps, but about yourself. In some cultures, waking between sleeps was considered essential if you wanted to receive these dream messages. You had to pass through the liminal, between rest and waking, to open the door. And now, you're back on the other side of that door. You close your eyes. You feel the weight of the blanket pull you downward, like soil slowly covering seeds. The air in the room has cooled slightly, but not enough to discomfort you, just enough to pull the blanket closer. The silence is thicker now. Even the old house has settled. No creaks, no distant coughs, no wind scratching at the shutters. It is still. People who studied segmented sleep, like historian Roger Eckerch, found that references to it span centuries and continents. From medieval England to pre-industrial African societies, the rhythm appears again and again. First sleep, a gentle waking, a few moments, sometimes an hour or more, of quiet wakefulness. And then second sleep. People accepted it, planned around it, even cherished it. It was not a disruption, it was an expectation. You wonder what the world would feel like if we honored that rhythm again. If, instead of staring into blue light at 2 a.m. with clenched jaws and racing thoughts, we simply rose from the bed, lit a candle, drank something warm, wrote something strange, and returned when we were ready. If our bodies were trusted instead of being scheduled, you sigh. That thought alone could put you to sleep. And it does. The dream comes slowly this time. Not like the first one, all flickering scenes and half-forgotten memories. This one is soft, spacious, unconcerned with your name or story. You're walking again, but this time across a quiet field, ankle-deep in moon-colored grass. A river reflects the stars like silver coins. Somewhere, a bell rings, but only once. There's no plot, just motion, just being. You turn over in the bed, half aware. The dog, still curled by the hearth, twitches its paws. A distant rooster calls, but too early. He doesn't know yet. The second sleep isn't done. You smile in the dark and drift again. You wake again, not suddenly, not sharply, just the way a leaf detaches from a branch, quietly, by design. It's not the crow of a rooster, it's not the sun piercing through shutter gaps. It's something smaller, more internal, a twitch in your shoulder, the stillness of the room shifting weight, the kind of waking that doesn't demand urgency, only recognition. Your second sleep has ended, and your body knew it before your mind did. You open your eyes slowly, and the world is still gray. The edge of dawn hasn't quite reached the sky, but something has changed. The shadows are less heavy now. The embers in the hearth are no longer red, just black curls of cooled ash. You stretch your legs beneath the blanket. Your joints give a soft protest, the way they always do. But even that feels familiar, like the sound an old friend makes when they clear their throat before speaking. Your hand finds the folded wool at the bed's edge. You pull it up over your shoulders and sit quietly for a moment, just breathing. The dog stirs, then settles again. There's no rush. You have time. For thousands of years, across continents and empires, human sleep was not a battle, it was a cycle, and the body was trusted to follow it. What we now call interrupted sleep was once celebrated, natural, expected, reverent. Modern medicine has a word for it now, biphasic sleep. But ancient people didn't need Latin to describe it. They simply called it sleep. There are old writings from 14th century France that described the watching hour, the time after first sleep when villagers would wake, sit by their fires, talk softly, or pray. It was said that in this moment, a person was closest to truth, not distracted by the burdens of the day or the dreams of the early night. In the 9th century, Arabic physicians recorded similar patterns. Night was divided into thirds, the first for deep rest, the second for prayer and reflection, the last for readiness. And even in West African oral tradition, elders spoke of rising between dreams as a moment of spiritual listening, the time when ancestors were most likely to whisper, when the air between the worlds grew thinnest. No matter the culture, no matter the climate, the body found a rhythm. It wasn't rushed. It wasn't optimized. It simply remembered. You rise from the bed. The floor is cold underfoot, not painfully so, just enough to sharpen the moment. A faint glow slips through the edges of the shutter, not sunlight, but pre-light, the kind of early hush that comes before the birds begin. You walk to the basin, splash water onto your face, and wipe it away with a square of linen. It's rough, worn from use, but clean. Your body hums with a tiredness that's no longer sleep-bound. This is morning tired, the kind that gently tightens your shoulders but doesn't steal your focus. Outside, something shifts. A hen, a wheelbarrow creak, a sighing tree. This is when your day will begin, but softly. There's no morning alarm, no email, no commute. Just movement. Just chores, maybe prayer, maybe warm ale or honeyed oats, maybe silence. In ancient Japan, the Edo period homes were structured around nandin, or the second phase of rest, a moment often filled with whispered poetry or walking the garden paths before dawn. In 18th century Russia, winter nights stretched long enough for 3 separate sleeps, interspersed with tea, old songs, and the mending of clothes by firelight. One sleep was for the body, another for thought, the last for peace. And in many parts of rural Europe, even into the 19th century, it was completely normal to wake up and have full conversations in the dark, only to return to bed and pick up sleep like it had never left. The body wasn't fighting itself. It was following instructions written long before clocks. You open the shutters. The horizon is beginning to turn gold at the edges. Not bright, not bold, just enough to lift the black from the sky and replace it with something gentler. There's a figure walking in the field, a neighbor, or maybe a stranger, too far to tell. They move slowly, like someone who woke just before they meant to. You think of how many others are doing the same thing. Not now, perhaps, not anymore. But once, this was the most natural thing in the world, to rise, to pause, to sleep again, to greet the darkness not as an enemy, but as a space, a companion. You lean against the frame of the window, and you wonder, what else have we forgotten that was once this simple? The sun is almost up now. You can feel it more than see it, a shift in weight, a loosening of the shadows, a warmth not from the hearth but from something ancient moving across the sky. You wrap your shawl tighter. The air still bites, but gently now, like it's remembering how to be morning again. You set your mug down, warm water steeped in crushed mint and a little bark. Not tea, exactly, just enough to warm your breath. There's no clock to check, just the changing light. You've noticed that time feels different in this place. Not just slower, deeper, more circular than linear. It doesn't run in lines, ticking forward from alarm to deadline, but spirals gently through the same paths: sun, sleep, frost, fire. A rhythm your body once knew and is learning again. You are not late for anything. You are not early either. You are exactly where you are, wrapped in wool, holding a mug, watching the trees begin to change color one leaf at a time. And no one expects anything more. In most ancient communities, time was not measured by minutes. It was measured by the turning of the earth, the call of birds, the feel of cold air pressing into the stone walls. The hour of waking might have been marked by a rooster's cry, or the sound of footsteps on a shared path, or the smell of bread reaching readiness in the communal oven. There were no buzzing phones, no mechanical alarm clocks, only rhythms, seasons, instincts. In fact, the concept of 8 hours of uninterrupted sleep is not ancient at all. It's barely even old. The strict 8-hour block became popular only with the rise of industrialization, when factory whistles replaced roosters and shift bells told the body when to stop dreaming. Before that, people woke when it made sense. They slept when it was dark. And if they woke in the middle of the night, they didn't panic. They sat by the fire, talked, stared into nothing, and then slept again. There are written records from the 16th and 17th centuries of people referring openly to their first sleep and second sleep, as if it were the most natural thing in the world, because it was. You take a slow step out the door. The village is stirring now, not loudly, just enough to remind you that you're not dreaming anymore. Someone is chopping wood. Another pours water from a cistern. The clank of a kettle. The creak of an old wooden cartwheel finding its rhythm again after a long freeze. You pass a neighbor, an older man in a blue cloak. He nods to you. You nod back. That's enough. The air smells of clay and wet soil. Smoke from a fire. Bread, still warm, tucked into cloth. Everything is in motion, but nothing is rushed. In ancient Iceland, people spoke of tímabil, not times, but time phases. Sleep, waking, walking, silence, each was seen as a different kind of presence. One did not replace the other. They overlapped, folded into each other like layers of wool. In parts of pre-colonial Africa, elders told stories of the talking hour, that deep middle point between sleeps when the body let go of logic and opened to vision. This time wasn't lost, it was sacred. Even in ancient China, texts from the Han Dynasty speak of yezo, night-sitting, a form of meditation and quiet reflection done between periods of rest, especially among scholars, monks, and mystics. It wasn't insomnia, it was invitation. You crouch beside a small patch of earth where last year's herbs grew. Tiny shoots poke through now, not enough to use, just enough to remind you they're still there. They remember the seasons, just as your body remembers this slower way, this deeper quiet, this sleep that doesn't ask you to win anything, only to trust. When people today wake at 2 a.m., they often panic. They reach for screens. They try to bargain with sleep like it's a distracted employee. But in older times, waking in the middle of the night didn't mean failure. It meant you were paying attention. It meant you were alive. You kneel and pick a dry sprig from the ground. Press it between your palms. Breathe in. And for a moment, even though the world around you has changed, you feel a little closer to that memory, the one your bones still carry, the one sleep still speaks in. The light is full now, though the sun has only just crested the trees. It doesn't flood the room, not the way electric light does. It creeps in, patient, diffused by the fog, softened by the linen curtain you didn't bother tying back. You hear someone stirring down the path. A wooden bucket bumps against a stone wall. A quiet "oomph" from a throat not ready to speak yet. A door creaks open, then stills. And inside your cottage, something stirs too. Not a noise, not a breeze, just the sense that the bed behind you is still warm, that sleep isn't always a solitary act. The bed you rose from was not empty when you left it. And now your partner, your sister, your child, a cousin, a traveling friend, is rolling toward the warm spot your body left. They're not quite awake, not quite asleep either, just hovering in the in-between, where dreams still echo and reality doesn't ask much of you. For most of history, this is what sleep looked like. It was shared, not just by couples or families, but by entire households, sometimes by travelers, sometimes by complete strangers. A bed was often one of the warmest places in a home, a resource that wasn't squandered. It was a tool of survival as much as a cradle of rest. And in long, drafty homes with few partitions, warmth was precious. So people slept together, not for romance or intimacy, but for heat. You wouldn't ask someone why they were in your bed. You'd ask if they were warm enough. There are English court records from the 1500s describing entire inns where 4 or 5 people might share a bed, heads and feet alternating. If you were new to town, it was simply expected that you'd share a sleep space. Some monasteries had sleeping chambers the size of barns, where rows of monks would sleep head to toe, their breath creating clouds in the cold air of winter vigils. In colder climates, like Scandinavia, entire families, sometimes 3 generations, slept in built-in wall beds with sliding panels, layered in pelts, wool, and quilts stitched from old tunics. And in Japanese rural homes during the Edo period, tatami floors were lined edge to edge with family members. The parents in the middle, children on the sides. A sleep formation that felt less like order and more like protection. Sleep was a village activity, a household ritual, a quiet communion. You sit back on the edge of the bed. Behind you, your partner opens their eyes just a little. They don't speak, you don't either. The conversation is unnecessary. You both feel the same thing. That you've returned from a world not quite your own, and there's no need to explain where you've been. They sigh and roll over, burying their face into the still warm part of the blanket you left behind. You smooth a hand across their back once. Then you rise again. There's water to carry, wood to chop, bread to knead. But all of that can wait another few moments. You find yourself remembering the times, recent, distant, uncertain, when sleeping next to someone else meant survival. Not in the dramatic sense, just in the human sense. Sleep researchers have noted that in modern individualist societies, sleep is often treated as a performance, something to optimize, improve, track with apps and graphs. We treat it as a private endeavor, 1 bed per person, quiet, closed door, eyes shut, don't roll. But the historical sleep was messy, layered, noisy, warm. It had elbows and dreams shared out loud, and snoring, and shifting feet. And in many ways, it was more natural than the version we chase now. There is evidence that co-sleeping, in various forms, helped regulate breathing, that babies sleeping near parents developed more stable rhythms, that people who heard others shift in the night were more likely to remain calm and fall back asleep. We didn't just sleep near each other for heat, we did it because we are not solitary creatures. and deep down, the body knows that. You lift a heavy wool coverlet from a chair and fold it slowly. Each fold releases a puff of air scented like smoke and chamomile. You place it on the end of the bed. There's a hum in the village now. You can hear voices in the distance, a child laughing, someone calling a name across a field, a pig squealing, not unhappily. But even as life stirs around you, something in you is still rooted in that soft space between sleeps. The memory of a warm shoulder, the twitch of a sleeping dog's paw, the quiet presence of someone who didn't leave while you dreamed. You step back toward the hearth. The embers are cold now, but they did their job. So did the bed, so did the night, so did your body. You were held by darkness and warmth and breath, not alone, not afraid. And sleep, as it turns out, was never meant to be a race toward oblivion. It was meant to be shared, slowly, softly, night after night, like language, like fire, like love. The day has taken hold now. There are feet on the path outside. The baker's boy is shouting something about burnt loaves. A dog trots through the village with something suspiciously bread-shaped in its mouth. You stir porridge with a wooden spoon. The sound of the bubbling is gentle, like small sleep breaths echoing in the pot. You sit beside the hearth and the warmth creeps back into your legs. And still, part of you lingers in the dark. Not the fearful dark, not the anxious kind that hides monsters under beds or deadlines in the hallway. The soft dark, the velvet dark, the one filled with firelight and quiet voices, the one between dreams. Most of the world has forgotten that kind of night, not on purpose, not because we meant to lose it, but because clocks grew louder and streets grew brighter, and we stopped trusting sleep to take care of itself. Now, when we wake up in the middle of the night, we reach for our phones, we squint, we sigh, we wonder if something's wrong. But in the past, not even so long ago, that waking would have felt normal, natural, safe, shared. A chance to listen, to breathe, to think, to stitch, to sit with a child who couldn't rest, to write, to wander barefoot across wooden floors and whisper to the cat, or to God. You remember the stories. A woman wakes at midnight and trims a wick. She prays. She does not measure her rest in hours, but in usefulness. A boy wakes after first sleep and sits at the edge of the bed, feet dangling. His grandmother is already up, making tea from dried chamomile. They talk in low voices, and he doesn't know it yet, but he'll remember that moment forever. A monk hears the bell and rises, not rushed, not groaning, just ready. The psalms are waiting, and so is the second sleep that follows them. In every case, sleep is not an enemy. It is a visitor. It comes, it goes, it returns. You eat slowly. The spoon is warm. The grains are soft. A bit of honey stings your teeth the way sweetness does in the morning. There is no rush. You will work later. You will walk the orchard. You will patch a sleeve and gather eggs. And then, when the sun slips low again, when the birds go quiet and the coals turn red, your body will know. It will remember. It will lie down and rest. And when it wakes in the deep hour, it won't be afraid. Because now you know what that waking is. Today, we are told that waking in the night is a disorder, a malfunction, a thing to fix. But there is growing evidence from historians, anthropologists, sleep scientists, that this ancient rhythm, this two-part sleep, is not a flaw at all. It is ancestral. It is biological. It may even be better for us than the compressed, caffeine-bound sleep we chase today. And if we stop fighting it, if we embrace the wakeful hour as a gift, a pause, a breath in the middle of the night, something remarkable happens. The pressure disappears, and sleep, relieved of its burden to be perfect, returns on its own. Like a cat finding your lap, like a river finding its course, like your breath when you stop holding it. You finish your meal, wipe your spoon, fold the cloth. Outside, the day unfolds its spine. But inside, in the part of you that lived through the quiet hours, something lingers. A softness, a rhythm, a memory not just of dreams, but of the space between them. And tonight, when you wake, as you likely will, perhaps you won't panic. Perhaps you'll sit up, breathe, listen, thank the dark for visiting you once more. And then, without effort or fear, you'll lie back down and dream again. Not because the clock says so, but because sleep knows the way back. It always has. It's sometime after midnight now. You wouldn't know it by looking. There's no clock ticking nearby, just the hush of the sleeping world and the faint crackle of embers under ash. You're sitting by the window again. The linen curtain drifts just slightly in the cold air. Through the gaps in the shutter, you see a sliver of moonlight, and beyond that, nothing at all. But it doesn't feel empty. It feels full. This was the hour they once called the watching hour, a time for prayer, for stillness, or for weaving the loose threads of the day into something more complete. You aren't dreaming anymore, but you're not entirely awake either. In some villages, this was when stories were told. In longhouses in northern Europe, parents would whisper fables to children curled beside them in beds of straw. A witch who spoke to owls, a king who never slept, a child who dreamed so deeply he forgot to wake. Elsewhere, a mother might rise quietly to check her child's fever. A grandfather might light a small oil lamp to record a note, not in a diary, but on a scrap of bark or cloth or memory. This was the hour between the two sleeps. Not dead space, not wasted time, but a threshold. Today, most of us never stand at this threshold. We live by glowing rectangles and algorithms that scream when we fall out of rhythm. But sleep doesn't need optimizing, it needs honoring. There's peace in letting your body do what it's always known how to do: to drift, to wake, to reflect, to return. And maybe that's what we're meant to remember, that between waking and dreaming, there is room to simply be. You lie back now. There's nothing left to fetch. The wood is stacked, the fire is out. The wind outside stirs only the barest branches, and your breath, for once, feels quiet in your chest. The night has done its work, not in haste, not in perfection, but gently. It held you, it let you wake, and now it lets you return. No one rushes you. No one demands that you fall asleep. There is no timer, no task. Only the bed, the soft breath of someone nearby, the memory of that quiet hour you spent listening to the dark. Maybe this is what we've been missing. Not more sleep, but a different kind. The kind that doesn't mind if you wake in the middle. The kind that welcomes you into its folds when you're ready. The kind that isn't measured in steps, graphs, or streaks. Just sleep. Shared, split, sacred. The ancient rhythm still tucked somewhere inside you. Even now, it's waiting. You shift slightly on the mattress. The straw beneath creaks softly. A breeze sneaks in under the shutter. You pull the blanket higher and let it settle beneath your chin. You do not need to dream. This moment is enough. This moment, half between the old world and the new, is sleep's favorite place. Close your eyes, or don't. The dark is kind, and you are safe here. Tonight, you remembered something you didn't know you'd forgotten. Tomorrow, maybe you'll remember it again. To sleep, then wake, then sleep again. The night is long, but never lonely.